When I saw the two of them laughing together, the man I once called my husband and my own little sister, I felt something inside me break in a way I didn't know was possible. That moment, frozen in time on my phone screen, changed everything. It wasn't just betrayal. It was the kind of stab that goes straight through your heart, twisting it into something unrecognizable. And what made it unbearable was the laughter. The casual, cruel laughter between them, as if I were nothing more than a joke. My name is Chloe Mitchell, and this is my story. Before everything fell apart, life was normal, maybe even good, by most standards. I was married to Brandon. He was the kind of man who could light up a room with his smile. Or so I thought. We'd been together for 7 years, married for 5, building a life that, to the outside world, looked stable and happy. Our home was a modest 2-story in a quiet neighborhood, filled with the smell of fresh coffee in the mornings and the sound of Brandon's off-key singing as he cooked breakfast. I loved those little things. The way he'd ruffle my hair when he thought I wasn't looking, or how he'd make me laugh with silly jokes even when I was stressed. We didn't have children, but that never felt like a hole in our life, at least. Not at first. My parents, Diane and Robert, lived just a few miles away. They were the kind of parents who kept up appearances, always making sure the neighborhood knew how perfect their family was. My younger sister, Sierra, was a free spirit, 2 years younger than me, wild, fun, and utterly unpredictable. Growing up, she'd always been the favorite, the one my parents doted on more. I brushed it off as sibling rivalry, something normal, until later I understood it was much more than that. I still remember that evening, weeks before the nightmare unraveled, when something first felt off. Brandon came home later than usual. The faint smell of cologne mixed with something else, cheap whiskey, maybe? His usual easy smile was tighter, his eyes flickering with something I couldn't place. "Long day at work," he said, but his voice had a strain I didn't hear before. I wanted to ask what was wrong, but he changed the subject quickly, distracted by the game on TV. And then there was Sierra. She stopped texting me as often, her messages growing shorter, less warm. One afternoon, I caught her glance furtive and hurried when Brandon walked into the room during a family dinner. I chalked it up to coincidence. I told myself I was imagining things, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Over the next few weeks, that doubt grew into a gnawing feeling I couldn't shake. I started noticing little things: Brandon's phone buzzing and him hiding the screen, his sudden need for privacy. Sierra's behavior became stranger, avoiding eye contact, canceling plans with me last minute, always seeming distracted when we were together. One night, Brandon came home smelling like perfume, not mine. And when I asked, his answer was clipped, irritated. "Stop being paranoid, Chloe. You're overthinking." But I wasn't. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones. I tried to push it aside, telling myself I was being silly, that maybe I was just insecure. But every lie I told myself cracked under the weight of the truth waiting to be uncovered. Then came the day I found the messages. I was looking for a charger in Brandon's jacket pocket, something I'd borrowed earlier, and my fingers brushed against his phone. It buzzed. The screen lit up. I didn't want to see it. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. The texts were from Sierra. They were intimate. More than just a passing flirtation. The words between them were electric and careless, filled with secret jokes and plans to meet in places I never knew existed. My breath caught. My hands trembled. I backed away, heart pounding in my chest. The room felt suffocating, the walls closing in. How long had this been going on? How blind was I? And then came the pictures. They laughed together in a crowded bar, leaning close, Brandon's hand resting on Sierra's waist. Sierra's head tilted, eyes sparkling with mischief, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. I wanted to scream, to disappear, to wake up and find it was all a nightmare. But it wasn't. When I confronted them, the anger came before the tears. I remember the way Brandon's face turned cold, almost amused. "You don't get to play the victim here, Chloe," he sneered. Sierra, my own sister, looked down, but I could see the defiance in her eyes. "You never understood me," she said quietly. "You never cared." Their words stabbed me deeper than any betrayal. I begged, pleaded for them to stop, to explain. But there was nothing left to explain. My family, my own parents, didn't stand by me. Instead, they chose sides. Diane's voice was sharp when I called her in the days after. "You pushed Sierra away. Maybe this is her way of finding happiness." Robert's silence was just as loud. I realized then that I was alone. That night, I packed a bag. I left the house that had been my sanctuary and drove away with nothing but the clothes on my back and a heart shattered into pieces. I moved to a new state, far from everything and everyone who had hurt me. I found a small apartment where the walls were bare and the silence was thick, but it was my chance to start over. Therapy became my lifeline. The sound of my therapist's calm voice, the smell of the leather couch, the slow healing of my bruised heart. I learned to breathe again. And then, there was Ethan. He was a chef. Quiet, kind, with eyes that held no judgment. We met at a small coffee shop, where I was scribbling in my journal, lost in thought. He smiled at me like I was the only person in the room. Over time, his gentle presence helped me trust again. We cooked meals together, shared laughter and stories. With him, I felt safe. For the first time in years, I believed in love again. But life has a way of circling back. Years later, Brandon found me, humbled, broken, begging for forgiveness after Sierra had left him cheated on him, just as they had both done to me. He stood on my doorstep, eyes filled with regret. But I had no words left for him. I told him to leave, to never darken my door again. Then, the unimaginable happened. My parents tracked me down with a desperate plea. Sierra was dying, kidney failure, and I was the perfect match. I sat in the sterile hospital room, the beep of machines filling the silence. Sierra looked at me pale, fragile, bleeding. I let them believe I would donate, but as the doctors prepared the tests, I made a choice. I would let her die knowing the one person who could save her had chosen not to. And to my parents, I delivered the final words they deserved. Words filled with years of pain, betrayal, and disappointment. This is the story of how I lost my family, found myself, and finally, learned to say no. I remember the quiet hum of the fluorescent lights overhead as I sat in the hospital waiting room, my hands clenched tightly in my lap. The sterile scent of antiseptic mixed with the faint, bittersweet smell of flowers someone had left nearby. It was ironic, the sweetness masking so much pain. Sierra's diagnosis had hit me like a freight train. Kidney failure. No second chances. And me, the one person who could save her. I thought about the years before, how she had torn through my life like a wildfire. How she had taken what was mine, my husband, my family's loyalty, and left me standing in the ashes. Now, she was weak, frail, and they wanted me to be her savior. My parents' faces haunted me as they sat there, desperate and hopeful. Diane's eyes swollen from crying, Robert's stiff jaw, the lines on his face deepening with every minute. I hated the way they looked at me like I owed them something, like I owed Sierra her life. But the truth was simple. I didn't. I had rebuilt my life piece by piece after the betrayal. Far from their toxic grasp, I learned to breathe again in a new city. Far from Brandon's smirks and Sierra's lies. Therapy helped me piece together the shattered parts of me. Ethan was the one light that remained steady. His soft voice, the smell of garlic and rosemary from his kitchen, the way he'd brush his fingers through my hair, all of it grounded me. Together, we built a new family. One founded on kindness and trust. I wasn't going to throw that away. Not for the people who had abandoned me when I needed them most. When the doctors finally called me in for the compatibility tests, my heart pounded not with fear or compassion, but with a cold, steady resolve. I was a perfect match. They said it with quiet hope, as if this was some miracle. I let them believe I would save Sierra. They didn't need to know the truth. Sitting by her hospital bed, I saw the flicker of recognition in Sierra's eyes when I entered. Chloe. Her voice was a whisper, weak but filled with something like regret. I nodded, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I'm here," I said softly. Her family hovered nearby, hopeful, waiting for the miracle they believed I would be. But inside, I felt the weight of years of betrayal pressing down, heavy and unforgiving. That night, as the machines beeped steadily, I made my decision. I was done carrying their pain, done with the endless cycle of forgiveness that only led to more hurt. I told the doctors I wasn't a donor. Their faces fell, shocked and confused. I held their gaze steadily. "I won't be donating my kidney," I said, voice calm but firm. The room erupted in disbelief. Sierra's mother gasped. "Chloe, please, think about family." My parents stared at me, their faces twisting with betrayal and anger. I looked at Sierra, lying there pale and broken, and said the words I knew would cut the deepest. "You made your choices. So did Brandon. You cheated on the people who loved you, tore us apart." Tears welled up in Sierra's eyes. "But your family?" I shook my head, voice steady. "Family is more than blood. It's trust, loyalty, love. And you had none for me." I turned to my parents, who had defended Sierra and Brandon without hesitation. "Diane, Robert," I said, "you chose to side with the cheaters, the liars. You let them destroy your own daughter." Their faces crumpled. But I wasn't finished. "I'm done with your hypocrisy. I'm done with your poison." I stood, heart pounding, and walked out of that sterile hospital room for the last time. Back home, Ethan was waiting, his arms open, his warmth a balm to the wounds that never fully healed. I realized then that family isn't just the people who share your blood, it's the people who show up, who choose you every day. I had lost a sister, a husband, and parents who once meant the world to me. But I had found myself. In the quiet of our apartment that night, the weight of everything settled around me like a thick fog. Ethan lit candles in the kitchen, their soft glow casting gentle shadows on the walls. The aroma of his simmering tomato sauce filled the air, a small comfort after the day's storm. I sat at the table, tracing the rim of my empty cup, trying to make sense of the emotions swirling inside me. Grief, anger, relief, tangled together in a way that felt impossible to unravel. Ethan came over, brushing a stray lock of hair from my face. "You did what you had to do," he said quietly. "You protected your peace." His words were simple but held a weight I needed to hear. For years, I had been taught that family meant unconditional love and forgiveness, no matter the cost. But what if that love was toxic? What if forgiveness only enabled the betrayal to continue? I looked up at Ethan, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope. In the weeks that followed, the silence from my biological family was deafening. No calls, no messages. The only sound was the quiet echo of the hospital's final farewell. Brandon never reached out again. Sierra, I learned later, had passed away, alone and unloved by the one person who could have saved her. It was a bitter end for a woman who had once been my sister. And for me, it was closure. Rebuilding wasn't easy. Therapy became a ritual not just to heal, but to understand. I learned to listen to my own voice again, to trust my instincts. I learned to say no, to set boundaries, to choose myself. Ethan stood by me through it all. He wasn't perfect, no one is, but he was kind, patient, and willing to walk beside me. Not ahead or behind. We built a life together, grounded in honesty and respect. Sometimes, I catch the scent of garlic or basil, and it reminds me of the simple joy of cooking side by side with someone who truly cares. Sometimes, I wonder about the family I left behind. What lessons did they learn? Did they ever realize the cost of their choices? But then I remind myself, my peace is not their burden to bear. I have learned that sometimes the hardest love is the one that says goodbye. One afternoon, as Ethan and I sat on our porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt the quiet strength that comes from surviving. The breeze carried the faint smell of rosemary from his garden. I took a deep breath and smiled. This life messy, imperfect, but mine is worth fighting for. Before everything fell apart, I used to believe in fairy tale love, the kind that sweeps you off your feet and never lets go. Brandon and I, we were that couple on the surface. Friends said we were perfect for each other. I wanted to believe it too. Our mornings were simple rituals. The sound of the coffee maker gurgling, Brandon humming off key while flipping eggs, the soft clink of mugs as we sat together at the kitchen table. I remember the warmth of the sunlight streaming through our windows, the smell of fresh toast still lingering in the air. Those moments felt safe, ordinary in the best way. Brandon's voice was usually calm and gentle, but sometimes it carried a hint of impatience. I'd notice it when he was tired from work or stressed about a project. Still, he always tried to make me laugh, even if it was with a ridiculous joke or an exaggerated impression of my boss. Sierra was the wild card in all of this, a spark of unpredictability in our steady lives. She had this effortless way of commanding attention. Whether she was telling a story or just laughing too loudly at her own jokes, she was the younger sister who got away with everything. The one my parents adored more than they ever let on. When she came over for Sunday dinners, the house felt alive with her energy. She'd drag Brandon into debates about politics or music, and they'd end up teasing each other like old friends. I was happy, or so I thought. But beneath that surface, cracks were forming small, almost invisible at first. One evening, I noticed Brandon's phone lighting up repeatedly, but he quickly tucked it away whenever I glanced over. His texts were brief, filled with emojis and inside jokes I didn't understand. Sierra started canceling plans with me last minute, always apologizing but never quite explaining why. At family dinners, she would shoot me sidelong glances, like she was hiding a secret. The tension was subtle but unmistakable. It hung in the air between us like a shadow I couldn't quite reach. I tried to ignore it. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was reading too much into nothing. But the unease grew. One rainy afternoon, I stayed late at work. When I finally got home, the house was dark and empty. Brandon wasn't there. I found his jacket hanging by the door, his cologne faint in the air. The silence felt heavy, oppressive. I called his phone. No answer. Then, I saw the notification on his locked screen. A message from Sierra. My heart stuttered. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. The messages were innocent enough on the surface, plans to meet, jokes about shared memories, but there was a tenderness in their tone that made my stomach twist. I scrolled further, and the words became more intimate, more urgent. Can't wait to see you. Miss you already. My hands trembled. The room seemed to tilt. I wanted to scream, to cry, to run, but instead, I sat there in the dark, heartbreaking quietly. I confronted Brandon that night, voice shaking. "Who is Sierra to you?" He looked at me like I was crazy. "What are you talking about?" I showed him the messages, his face drained of color. "You're reading too much into this." But I saw the flicker of guilt in his eyes. The betrayal cut deeper when I confronted Sierra. Her eyes were cold. "I'm tired of pretending, Chloe," she said, voice like ice. "Brandon makes me feel alive in a way you never did." That night, the house felt like a cage closing in. My parents chose silence, then coldness. Diane whispered, "Maybe you drove her away." Robert shook his head, refusing to meet my gaze. I realized I was fighting alone. The days after that confrontation blurred together, a haze of sleepless nights and endless questions. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The betrayal wasn't just about Brandon and Sierra, it was the way my own family had turned their backs on me, choosing the cheaters over their own daughter. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, the early morning light filtering through the blinds, casting long shadows across the floor. The silence was deafening. Brandon was gone, leaving behind the empty spaces he once filled with laughter and warmth. I called Diane, hoping for some kind of comfort, some sign that my parents saw the pain they had caused. "Chloe, you need to move on," she said coldly. "You can't hold on to this bitterness forever." It was a slap in the face. They weren't on my side, not even a little. So I made a decision. I was done trying to salvage a family that had already destroyed me. The divorce papers were the next step. Signing them felt like tearing a piece of my soul out, but also like finally cutting loose from chains I'd been dragging for years. I hired a small lawyer in my new city, someone who didn't know me or my past, who could help me start fresh. The legal process was painful, but necessary. Every signature, every meeting, every phone call reminded me of the life I was leaving behind. But I was determined. Therapy became my refuge. At first, I resisted it, afraid to confront the storm inside me. But with every session, I peeled back the layers of hurt and betrayal. My therapist's office was a safe space, with soft lighting and the scent of lavender. The gentle ticking of the clock helped ground me as I faced the truth of what had happened. I learned to listen to myself again, to feel without shutting down. I cried. I screamed. I mourned the family I had lost, and slowly, I began to heal. It was during this time that I met Ethan. He was different from anyone I'd ever known. Quiet, kind, steady. We met by chance at a coffee shop. I was scribbling in my journal, trying to capture the chaos in my mind. He smiled at me like I was more than just a stranger. Our first conversation was awkward but genuine. He told me about his passion for cooking, how food was his way of caring for people. I shared a little about my love for writing, the way words helped me process life. Over time, our connection grew. Ethan's kitchen became a sanctuary. The smell of fresh basil and garlic, the clatter of pots and pans, the sound of his soft humming, it all felt like home. He never pushed me to move faster than I was ready for. Instead, he showed me what trust looked like. With him, I learned that love could be gentle, but the past has a way of creeping back in. Years later, Brandon found me. He was broken, no longer the man who once laughed with ease. He begged for forgiveness after Sierra left him, cheating on him just like they had both done to me. I stood at the door, looking at the man who had shattered my world, and I told him no. I sent him away. The day they found me, the day my parents tracked me down after all these years, felt like a cruel twist of fate. I had built a quiet life with Ethan, one filled with peace and steady love, miles away from the chaos of my past. Yet, here they were, standing on my doorstep, faces desperate, voices trembling. "Sierra is sick," Diane said, her eyes pleading. "Kidney failure. She needs a transplant, and you're the only match." For a moment, I didn't say anything. The words echoed in my mind like a haunting refrain. Sierra, the sister who had betrayed me, the woman who had taken everything from me, was dying. I could feel the weight of their gazes, waiting for me to be the savior, the miracle. But all I felt was a deep, cold certainty. The hospital smelled the same as when I had first walked into that sterile place years ago. The antiseptic sting mixed with faint floral notes from a bouquet on the windowsill. The machines beeped softly, a mechanical heartbeat for a body slipping away. Sierra looked fragile, her skin pale and translucent under the harsh lights. Her eyes met mine, wide and scared. "Please," she whispered. "I'm sorry." But it was too late. I sat by her bedside, listening to the quiet hum of the machines and the desperate hope radiating from the room. The doctors confirmed I was a perfect match. They looked at me, hopeful. I let them believe I would save her. The decision was agonizing, but I knew I couldn't betray myself again. In front of the doctors, my parents, and Sierra, I told them I would not be donating my kidney. Shock rippled through the room. Sierra's mother wept, begging me to reconsider. Diane's face twisted with rage and disbelief. Robert's eyes darkened with resentment. I looked at them all and said the words they needed to hear. You made your choices. So did they. I will not be a part of this destruction. Sierra's tears fell silently as I walked away. The sound of my footsteps, the final goodbye. Back in my car, I let the tears come not for Sierra, but for the years of pain and betrayal that had led me here. Ethan was waiting when I got home, arms open, offering the love I had fought so hard to keep. I realized then that family isn't about blood alone. It's about who chooses to stay, to love, to fight for you. And for me, that family was the one I built with Ethan. The weeks that followed were a mix of quiet reflection and rebuilding. The weight of that final confrontation lingered, like a shadow refusing to lift. But for the first time in years, I felt a flicker of peace. Not the false kind that comes from denial, but a hard-earned calm that grows from standing firm in your truth. Therapy continued to be my anchor. The sessions helped me unpack the layers of grief, anger, and betrayal that had accumulated over a lifetime. I learned that healing wasn't linear. It was a slow, winding road filled with setbacks and breakthroughs. In the safety of those sessions, I finally allowed myself to mourn not just for the family I lost, but for the sister I never really knew. Ethan was my constant. His quiet support reminded me daily that love could be patient and steady. Our home, though modest, was filled with warmth, fresh herbs on the windowsill, the comforting clink of dishes, laughter that wasn't forced but genuine. He never pressed me to forget the past or rush the healing process. Instead, he held space for my pain, offering comfort without judgment. Together, we created a sanctuary where I could breathe, be myself, and grow. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, I felt a sense of gratitude wash over me. Life had taught me hard lessons about trust, betrayal, and resilience, but it also showed me the power of choosing yourself, of setting boundaries, and of creating new beginnings. I thought about my biological family, about Diane and Robert, and the sister who had broken me. I wondered if they understood the cost of their choices, the love they lost because they refused to stand with me. But their pain was not mine to carry. My peace was my own. In the end, I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. Sometimes, saying no is the strongest act of love. And sometimes, family is the people who choose you every day, not just the ones who share your blood. Thank you for listening to my story. It's not an easy one to tell, filled with betrayal, heartbreak, and difficult choices. But I share it because I know many of you have walked similar paths where those we expect to love us the most become the ones who hurt us deepest. What I've learned is this: healing begins when we stop trying to force love where it no longer exists. When we protect our hearts by setting boundaries, even if that means saying goodbye to family. Forgiveness can be a gift, but it's never an obligation. And sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is choose ourselves. If you're struggling with betrayal or toxic relationships, know that you're not alone. Healing takes time, but it's possible. There's strength in seeking help, in finding people who truly care, and in building a new family grounded in respect and kindness. Would you have made the same choice as I did? Would you have forgiven or walked away? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please share your story in the comments below. If this story touched you, please consider subscribing and supporting the channel for more real stories about love, loss, and resilience. Remember, your peace matters. Until next time, take care of yourself.